If you've been grinding Valorant day in and day out like I have, there's probably many scenarios where you're wondering what gun is directly better than the other. You experiment around. You try out the Spectre SMG one game and the Judge another, and you're just trying to get a feel for what guns are good and bad. Here at GameLeap, we have compared each and every gun and we've divided them into 4 tiers to help you better understand exactly what weapon is good or bad in every single situation. On top of that, we're going to be giving you tips and tricks on how to perform with each and every weapon. So do us a favor and smash that subscribe button. We're going to be pumping out double daily uploads. But with all that being said, let's just jump right into it, shall we? So kicking it right off on the list, let's talk about the tier 1 weapons, the creme de la creme, the weapons that you're going to want to be using and playing with almost in every game no matter what. Firstly, we're going to be talking about the assault rifles, and the 2 in question are the Phantom and the Vandal, both at 2,900 credits. Now, these weapons are very similar, and I wouldn't fault you for picking one over the other. While the Vandal excels at longer range, being able to one-shot through armor at 50 meters instead of the 15 from the Phantom, because of its lowered fire rate and magazine size, it's going to be a lot worse at closer ranges, which in general, you take a lot closer range fights on average. That being said, Vandal's going to be a lot better if you plan on holding longer sightlines, then I would definitely suggest picking the Vandal instead over the Phantom. But if you don't plan to be playing these extremely long sightlines, Phantom is going to be the more versatile weapon that's consistently better at winning 1v1s. All in all, the most important thing that comes down between these 2 weapons is personal preference, but both of them are just fine as they're both in tier 1. Now let's talk about the next weapon on our list, which is the sniper rifle, the Operator, at 4,500 credits. Now, the Operator is very expensive. We all know just how expensive the Op is, but it can one-shot in the body and, of course, a headshot as well. The Operator is very powerful at securing long sightlines and completely annihilating the enemy. If you have the money to spare and the aim to back it up, an Operator holding down a long sightline on defense or even peeking along sightline can definitely dominate the enemy and get you enough picks to make it worth justifying your cost. If you can use the Operator to secure your team a win, then it's definitely going to be worth the money that you spent into it. But if you use an Operator and die immediately, it can be a huge liability for your team because it's very, very expensive. And sometimes, instead of buying an Operator, you could buy yourself a pretty good setup and buy a teammate a weapon as well. All in all, it's going to be a pivotal weapon that you should definitely practice. The number 1 tip I would give for you when using the Operator is it's far better to hold sightlines than take them with the Operator. Because of the way Valorant's set up with no peeker's advantage, if you're holding a long sideline with an Operator, the second you see an enemy, if you have the aim for it, you can instantly shut them down, which means that you can get an easy pick. And if the enemy team has enough money to buy ops, you could check their money before the start of the round. You definitely need to be playing around ops through the long sightlines. It's not worth peeking long with your SMG if you know that multiple members on the enemy team have enough money to buy the Operator. That's a way that you're just going to get killed and die for free. Now we're going to move on to the last weapon that we're going to talk about in the tier 1 section, and it might be a little bit controversial, but I am sure that this is the truth. It's the Ghost Pistol that only costs 500 credits. Now the Ghost Pistol is very, very powerful, especially for first rounds and eco rounds in general. I think it's by far one of the best plays you can make. The Ghost Pistol is extremely accurate, it's silenced, and most importantly, it can one-shot headshot from a reasonable range if the enemy isn't using any armor. And even if they are using armor, you can follow up with multiple shots pretty easily because the weapon is dead accurate. Ghost not only has insane stats for its cost, it also feels incredibly well, and it can allow you to play that mid to short range. And if other enemies rock things like the basic pistol or the shorty or the frenzy in the first round and you're rocking a Ghost, you can definitely outrange them in that mid range and annihilate them very easily. I definitely think that it's the go-to weapon. If you're not going to save altogether, I think that it's the go-to weapon. And the cool thing about it being only 500 credits is you could easily buy 1 extra ability or even 2 extra abilities, a 200 and a 100 if those are really useful for your character. You can couple that with the Ghost, build yourself a comprehensive kit, and have a good gun to back up your plays. Now let's move on to tier 2. And these are weapons that are not as good, but they're still extremely good. Don't get it twisted. I'm not saying these weapons are bad by any means. They are definitely insanely good weapons that I wouldn't expect anyone to not use in all kinds of games. And I wouldn't even be surprised if you have these and you have the money to buy one of the tier 1 weapons. You choose not to, just for economy and the fact that these weapons are still very good. Now let's talk about the first weapon in this list. It's actually an SMG. It's the Spectre. Now the Spectre is only 1,600 creds and it's very good from mid to close range. It's a silenced SMG, its accuracy is very good. While its wall banging isn't quite as good as the ARs, it is extremely lethal and easy to control, and it's pretty easy to rack up kills with the Spectre. Especially if you're playing a class that wants to get in close, something like a Jet, Spectre is going to annihilate your competition, and it's one of the cool things that you could buy, especially if you win the first round. You could buy full armor plus a Spectre and have a pretty good mid to close range kit. Now, speaking of winning the first round, let's talk about the next weapon on our list, which is the Guardian. It's at 2,700 credits, so it's only 200 credits less than the Phantom of the Vandal. And you might be asking, why would I buy a semi-automatic rifle when I could buy a full auto for just 200 more? Well, the Guardian actually can one-shot from extremely long ranges away at 50 meters, just like the Vandal, but it's definitely easier to control, and I've found that it's actually really good at not firing aim down the sights. While firing aim down the sights is still good, you could still be pinpoint accurate as long as you're not moving, just firing the gun without aiming down the sights. On top of that, if you win first round, the pistol round, what you can do is buy the Guardian plus light armor. This allows you to peek extremely long sight lines, and the enemy is often not going to buy armor, and even if they do, you can still one-shot them. And more often than not, they're going to be saving, and they're not going to have any money to buy a weapon that can one-shot you. So as long as you have armor, even if they're rocking around with a ghost or anything like that, they turn the corner, they even headshot you perfectly, you're going to live that headshot while they're going to die instantly to your Guardian. You could get 2 taps off if you fire first before they could even get 1, and it's just a really powerful strategy to do, especially when you win that first round. And Guardian gives you the capability to win matchups against a lot of the better guns on the list. The Operator, the Vandal, the Phantom, these tier 1 weapons, you could still one-shot headshot full armor as long as you're 50 meters or less with the Guardian. That makes it really good. Sometimes it's far better to buy the Guardian and light armor than it is to buy the Phantom and no armor or anything like that. Now let's talk about the next weapon we have on the list, and this one might surprise you in the tier 2 category, but it's actually a sniper, and it's not the Operator, it's the Marshal. Now, the Marshal one-shot headshots no matter what, but it doesn't do as much damage to the body. It's usually going to take you 2 shots to the body to kill an enemy, and for a lot of people, this might turn you off on the weapon because it's really difficult to get those headshots off, but it's only 1,100 credits. Now, the reason that this is so important is because the Marshal can allow you to peek long angles against situations like that Guardian I talked about, or even against guns that are far better, like the Phantom and the Vandal. You can peek long angles when you have nearly $0, very little money. You could play something like Defense up in Heavens, or you could play something like a really long sightline, and as long as you hit those headshots, you can definitely win a matchup against far better guns, and for a measly $1,100, it is by far worth it. And actually, the Marshal feels a lot better than the Op. It doesn't slow you down in the same way. You can almost quickscope with the gun as long as you stand still. I definitely think that the Marshal is incredibly powerful and underrated, especially if you can hit the headshots on the gun. You can win tons of matchups for extremely cheaply. Bang for your buck, Marshal is definitely tier 2. Now let's talk about the last weapon in our tier 2 category, and it's the lowest on the tier 2 category, but I still think it's a very good gun. It's a pistol, the Sheriff, and you might feel more comfortable calling it a deagle because that's what most people call it. The reason that the Sheriff is so good is that it's only 800 credits, but it can one-shot headshot even through max armor. This means that you can use the Sheriff to turn a lot of matchups even when you have no armor or low armor against enemies that have good guns and good armor. Now, the Sheriff is incredibly difficult to use. It's not easy to hit your shots, but for those of you who can master the Sheriff, you will have an extremely powerful weapon to whip out during rounds that you need to clutch up, during rounds that you need to win when you have very low money. Sometimes you got to, and the Sheriff might be the gun for you. It is by far the cheapest gun that gives you the highest probability of actually changing a matchup against a far better kit than you have. So for that reason alone, it's gonna make it into the tier 2 category. But that being said, that $800 price tag just ekes it out of being better than the Ghost, because the Ghost allows you to not only buy a really powerful gun for the first round that's versatile at many ranges and extremely accurate, the Ghost also allows you to buy multiple abilities, which could be very important at winning the eco rounds, and even if you don't use the abilities, you still stack them for later on. Now let's move on to the tier 3 circuit, and I think that the tier 3 guns are definitely, through personal preference, they're very good in some scenarios, but others, they don't really work all that well. There's probably better options. They're essentially role fillers, and they definitely have a place for you in your kit as long as the money kind of lines up with it, and also your personal preference really matters, or a lot of different situations that I'm going to break down here. They're by no means bad, but they might not be the best guns in the game, and they actually aren't. So let's first talk about the 2 shotguns that are on the tier 3 list, the Bucky and the Judge. The Bucky is a pump shotgun that has 2 types of fire. One is a spread and one is a slug. It gives it a little bit of versatility. It's only $900 for the Bucky, and I think the Bucky does its job. It's not great by any means, but if you're barrel stuffing enemies with the Bucky, you're gonna kill them, and it's gonna do its job just fine. The Judge, in my opinion, which is a semi-auto shotgun at 1,500 credits, is far better. It can one-shot, it has multiple fire, it can fire like crazy. I've completely destroyed on the Judge And on classes like Omen and classes like Jet, where you get in on enemies and you try to go for these sneaky plays behind natural cover, you're just waiting, holding a corner, waiting for an enemy to peek through, you can definitely get a lot of value out of a judge. I think that a judge can slaughter enemies, but it's 1,500 credits compared to the 900 on Bucky, and I'm not sure that you would just rather not have a Spectre instead at only $100 more or 100 credits more. Now, I do think there's a lot of scenarios where the judge can get a lot of value. If you're hiding up top in an early round with something like a Jet, using your updraft to get into a really cheeky spot, or if you're playing Viper and you're in Viper's Pit. A judge is a nightmare in Viper's Pit. If you're a Viper and you're in your own pit and enemies are pushing you into a judge, they should be scared because the judge is just gonna slaughter them. I mean, I've gotten many 3 or 4 or 5Ks with the judge when I'm really not even doing anything crazy. I just get to kill someone. If I shoot at someone when I'm close to them before they realize it, they're dead before they can do anything about it. And you don't need any recoil control. You don't need any accuracy. You don't need to hit insane headshots. You just do simple to hit body shots and you just annihilate them with the judge. I think it's pretty good, but it also depends on where you're hiding, where you're pushing. You can't push long sidelines with it or either shotgun, so really keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the next gun on the list, which is the Bulldog at 2,100 credits. It's a burst fire gun while zooming in, while it's a fully auto while you're not, and it kind of makes it an assault rifle SMG hybrid. Now, it's definitely pretty expensive, but I know that it has its uses. It's good at close range, but not quite as good as some of the other guns on the list, notably the Spectre and later on the Stinger. It's not really quite as good as that, and it's decent at that mid-range when you're zooming in, but it's not as good as the Phantom, the Vandal, or the Guardian. I think the Bulldog is a weird middle-of-the-ground weapon, and it's definitely gonna probably be a weapon that a lot of people end up liking just because of its versatility. It has that burst fire, it has that semi-auto. I know me personally, I don't think I would ever use a gun that has burst fire. I just don't like it in general, and I'm pretty sure that I would rather use the Spectre than this almost every single time. But I know that I've talked to a lot of people that have really loved this gun, and it definitely has decent numbers as long as you can hit your shots. So I do think that Bulldog is probably a personal preference weapon that has a lot of uses. Now, last on the tier 3 list, before we get to the tier 4 list, the classic pistol. And the classic pistol is cool. It has a primary fire, it has an alternate fire, it's free, it does its job, and a lot of times you just want to just rock the classic pistol, make sure you save every dime so that the next round you have the perfect amount of money to buy that perfect Phantom, full armor, all your abilities, and you're good to go to win your buy round. Sometimes it's better to just not buy anything at all if you're willing to just give it up. It's also really important, before I move on, to coordinate your buys and sells. So I'm gonna make a whole video about the economy later on. So if you want to see a video about the game economy, the weapon economy, when you should buy, when you should sell, what does that mean for you personally, definitely smash that like button and subscribe button so that I can get right on it. Anyways, let's talk about tier 4. And I'm not gonna say that these weapons are bad. They're not great, but they definitely have their uses in certain situations, and I'm going to break those down. And I know that some people have a lot of personal preference. Now, that being said, a lot of these weapons might seem better than they actually are because the game is new. People like running around with every gun, and sometimes you see a 3K with one of these guns and you think it's great. But I'm telling you right now that these guns are guns that you really need to think about why you're buying it before you buy it. So the first weapon we're going to talk about in the tier 4 list is the Frenzy. It's a pistol, it's at 400 credits, and it's a fully auto pistol, which means it's really good at killing at close range. And you might be saying, I've been popping off with this pistol. It's insanely good. I can buy this pistol, I can buy light armor, I can go rush people. The problem with this pistol when it lines up against things like the Ghost is it's really bad anywhere outside of the closest of ranges. And if the enemy sets up in locations like Heaven or playing long sidelines or even mid sidelines, you're gonna have a lot of problems getting off damage with this weapon. Now, sure, you could cheese someone from behind, you're sneaking around the corner, you take these really short engagements, but as players get better, they're not gonna let you take these hyper short engagements, and they're gonna be checking every single corner, and I wouldn't want to be stuck with a Frenzy when an enemy is peeking me through mid with a Ghost or pretty much any other weapon. If you do buy the Frenzy because you're extremely poor and you want to buy it, I would suggest sneaking around, maybe hiding or camping in some natural cover or mixing it with some ability to potentially get a kill, immediately steal their weapon because you wanted to get a better weapon, and that's pretty much all I could see it used for. And in the same way, the Shorty is the same. The Shorty is a shotgun. It has 2 shots. It's only cost 200 credits, so it's incredibly cheap, and it can actually one-shot headshot a lot of different enemies if you're accurate with it, but after every 2 shots you have to reload, of course. Now, the Shorty I've actually had a lot of success with. I play Jet a lot. Jet is my main. I've probably put in 30 hours into Jet, just Jet at this point, and I'll be hiding in locations like up top, on top of boxes. I use my updraft to get there, or use my glide to get there, and enemies will push through, and I'll just double pump one of them, go and tailwind right away, get out of there. I secured the kill, and I'm running away. Now, a lot of times, Shorty is going to do that job if you get that close, just like the Frenzy will. It will end matchups right away, but it's completely useless outside of its range, which is about a foot away, is all you get with the Shorty. So we're talking about versatility here. We're talking about playing against better and better opponents. movements, and if you're going to play this weapon, you're essentially trying to cheese an enemy outside of their gun. You're trying to cheese for a kill, which can work when enemies are bad and the game is new and young and everyone's just running around like crazy. But I guarantee you that these weapons will not stand up to players getting better at the game. You're going to see a lot of the tier 3 and up weapons, specifically the tier 2 and tier 1, far more going forward. Now let's talk about another weapon on the tier 4, and it's the Stinger. It's at 1,000 credits, and it's an SMG fully auto. It suffers from the same problems that Frenzy and Shorty do. It's a good weapon, it's decent, it's an SMG, but it's going to be completely outclassed pretty soon. You can't buy it in the first round like the Frenzy and Shorty, which are their only advantages in my opinion. And then afterwards, it's going to be completely outclassed by things like the Spectre, by things like the Guardian, even the Sheriff, and of course the ARs. It's going to be really outclassed. You're going to be outranged, outdamaged. I would not suggest the Stinger in general, but maybe you're having a lot of success with it, and maybe if you're extremely poor and you have just enough to buy just that and maybe some armor, maybe you want to rock with that, but I would probably just save that round, or I would buy something else. Like if I'm trying to cheese people out of the game, I might just buy a Shorty instead and save most of my money. Now let's talk about the last two weapons on our list, which is the Ares and the Odin, two LMGs, which frankly, I've played very little because the only times I've ever used these guns is when I've picked them up off of a dead body when I only had a pistol, because I think that these guns are not very good. LMGs are not good in a game where you can get one-shot headshotted. The problem with LMGs, specifically the Odin, is it's gonna cause you to crouch when you're shooting. The recoil is insane. Everyone knows where you are. Now the Ares is a little bit better in that regard. It's a little bit lighter. It doesn't have as much recoil, and you could definitely use it to wallbang. I think that the only time you want to use it is when you're specifically using it with Brimstone, because he has an ability that allows you to speed up your reload and speed up your fire. It can let you peek a lot of corners with your team, but frankly, I wouldn't even touch these weapons that much. I think you have to have a very specific reason for wanting to pick these weapons up, and it can't just be because I have bad aim. You just need to practice and get better aim over time. I do not think that it's worth it in the long run for you to be playing one of these weapons, and I definitely wouldn't want to be stuck with one of these weapons if I was in a 1v1 matchup or any sort of matchup, really. So all in all, I definitely think that the 4 weapons in the tier 4 list are probably not what you want to be rocking, but there are some small scenarios where you can rock each and every one of them. And that being said, I do think that the balance of all the guns on the tier list are pretty close together. It's not like they're ages apart. It's not like you can't get a kill with the weapons of the tier 4. Of course you can. But I ranked these here so that you understand exactly what the best guns are, price to performance ratio, what you should be rocking with. Honestly, I pretty much only buy things in the tier 1 and tier 2 section, with the occasional judge in the tier 3 section, but your personal preference may vary. That being said, here at Game League, we're going to be pumping out 2 daily videos. That's right, 2 daily videos. So do me a favor and smash that subscribe button if you like the video, and definitely let me know if you agree or disagree with my tier list down below. I know that each and every one of your personal experiences are going to be different, so definitely let me know how you would change the tier list if it was your tier list. And let me know any other videos or guides or breakdowns or tier lists that you definitely want me to make. I will get right on it. Anyways, that's all we have for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time.